Good morning, namaskar, and a very warm welcome to all of you for the 81st Foundation Day of CSIR. To celebrate and mark the 81st CSIR Foundation Day, we are very fortunate that we have two eminent personalities with us. We have with us Professor Padma Shri Professor Rohini Godbole as our chief guest of this event, who is joining us online. We also have with us Padma Shri Professor Amitabh Malik, who is joining us in person, and he is the guest of honor of the day. Now, our important milestone of this function and indeed an exciting opportunity to listen to our next speaker and chief guest. I'm really feeling proud to introduce her to this esteemed audience. Professor Padma Shri Professor Rohini M. Godbole currently holds honorary professorship at the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. She is a theoretical particle physicist. She retired from the Center for High Energy Physics of the ISC after serving for almost 25 years. She has also worked in different capacities in a number of universities in India, Europe, and the USA, including at CERN Geneva. She has always also been conferred honorary DLET and DSc for her research over the past 4 decades on exploring the standard model of particle physics and physics beyond the standard model that has resulted in more than 300 publications in various reputed high impact journals as well as graduate textbooks. She is a fellow of the World Academy of Sciences, QAS, and she is also being elected to all the three science academies of India. Not only this, she has served as vice president of the Indian National Academy of Sciences, Allahabad, and is currently serving vice president of the Indian Academy of Sciences. She has been a member of CERN India Task Force and now she is a member of steering committee. She is member of various editorial boards of national and international journals and is also advisory board of Oxford Research Encyclopedia for Physics. Professor Godbola is not only a scientist but is also an avid supporter of the cause of women in science, working over the past decades to facilitate more effective participation of women in the scientific workforce. I would also like to add she has also documented a book, Leelavati's Daughters of, and these are about 100 biographies of women scientists of India. Now, this is an interesting aspect of her profile. She chaired the Committee on Equity and Inclusion for Science, India's Science, Technology, and Innovation Policy of 2020. She has extensive contributions to science and society that has been recognized at various national levels, and that's how she was conferred Padma Shri in 2019. And not only this, she was also honored with Ordre National du Mérite that was given to her by French government in 2021. I will go on and on. There is no end to whatever she has done for science and women empowerment in India. So I'll put a full stop here and will invite Madam to please go ahead with her chief guest address to this gathering. Over to you, Madam.
Good afternoon. I must first really thank Dr. Vaidya for inviting me to these celebrations of the 81st Foundation Day of CSIR. And Dr. Kumbhare for putting up with my requests, and the last one being that I have to have this talk online. All I can tell you is that I am not the guilty party. The guilty party is the American consulate, who actually sent the passport in during this celebrations, during this meeting. And this delivery of the passport was the thing which has kept me back here in Bangalore. So apologies. I wish I could be there on this important occasion. It's a great pleasure to have witnessed and actually heard the talk by the your chief honored guest of honor, as well as the presentation by the honored director Niri, and it even more important, if I, with due apologies to both of you, very senior and distinguished people, even more the younger people whom I see in the audience, and which I think hold the future of our science and technology ecospace. It was wonderful. It's also wonderful to see so many women because in the audience. So, all in all, I just feel very bad that I'm not there personally. I will try to keep my remarks somewhat brief, seeing the lateness of the hour. But what I will do is that instead of talking just like this, I would actually try to share my slides, particularly because, when the communication is across a distance, it might be useful to see the slides on screen side by side. So I will begin by sharing my slides, and that will take, I hope, not more than a minute. Of course, it does take more than a minute. Let's see. One second. Because if I don't succeed in sharing it, then I will just start talking. One second. Because we had checked it actually last night. Share. Huh. Okay. Window. Good. Can you people see my screen? Very good. So thank you very much for your patience. So, as I said, I am absolutely delighted to talk today. And what I have decided to do is to talk about one of the topics that dear to my heart, and I was very pleased to hear it in the Dr. Vaidya's address that it is also dear to the heart of the CSIR DG. And I am going beyond the empowerment of women. I'm going to talk about importance of inclusion in the vision of the new CSIR. And indeed, what is the plan of my talk? I will first spend a few minutes in talking about CSIR and its importance in India's ESTI ecosystem as I see it. And then I will talk about why diversity and inclusion are important aspects of the activities which bring benefits of science to society. And I will also specifically tell you which few aspects of diversity I will focus in my talk. And then I will finish by trying to tell you one particular aspect about CSIR's goals and missions, namely entrepreneurship, and why I feel that the entrepreneurship is particularly relevant in the context of women in science and what special purpose supporting the women entrepreneurship for women in science would serve a very special purpose and maybe end with some of the many avenues that are available these days. So, CSIR, first to begin with, happy Founders Day. CSIR is the part of the time period that has been leading for the last 75 years India's march on path of science, technology, and innovation. This the triumvirate is the UGC, the Science Departments of Government of India, and CSIR. And they have dealt with the education, research, and innovation to guide our country on the path to progress. Personally, on a personal note, CSIR gave me a research associateship for a few months when I was a young researcher in between jobs. I have been involved in various capacities with CSIR and mainly the extramural research division, given the somewhat esoteric nature of my own science pursuits, which deals with fundamental particles. And currently, I am also proud to be the mentor editor of the Indian Journal of Pure and Applied Physics of CSIR. So, what is CSIR's vision and mission? From the web page, I have taken this, and I think that was already read by our MC of the today's event. That CSIR's vision is pursue science, which strives for global impact, technology that enables innovation-driven industry, and nurture transdisciplinary leadership, thereby catalyzing inclusive economic development for the people of India. After 75 years of independence, and as the old, as they say in old English, fourscore years of its existence, CSIR is now redefining itself, revitalizing itself with changing times, as was already told to us. And again, what is the CSIR vision and mission? There were various bulleted items again from the web page. And I, in my talk, I'm going to focus on three of these bulleted items, namely science and engineering leadership, science based entrepreneurship, and socio-economic transformations through S&T interventions. And I want to talk about the importance of inclusion for these three bullet points, which appear in CSIR's mission and vision. Let me just first give you some thoughts of my own and which align with what has been said so far by me. These are on the science, technology, innovation, and connect between that and the society in general. It is very clear that we need science, technology, and innovation together to act together to bring the fruits of new developments to the society. But when these three things come together with an entrepreneurial spirit, it adds economic development to the list of benefits. And we actually have myriad of examples, particularly in the context of COVID-19 pandemic, which is, thank God, just about receding. For example, things like vaccine development of rapid, accurate, and in-free testing protocols, designs of inexpensive ventilators. These are examples where science, technology, innovation, and entrepreneurship came together to help the society and solve its problem. So, in general, there are certain thoughts that I want to give on entrepreneurship in general, that encouraging innovations which will bring applications of science and technology to the society is really part of CSI's mission and vision and program. And I already read out 2 points, namely science based entrepreneurship and socio-economic transformations through S&T interventions. Now, what I want to, my thesis today is to point to out importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think they are a very important part of the journey on the road of these two science-based entrepreneurship and path of socioeconomic transformation. Now, since there are a lot of people in the audience who might find these words diversity, inclusion, etc., equity, all kind of too confusing, let me say it very simply. Diversity in science simply means participation of different types of groups. It can be diversity of gender, it can be diversity of language. Some people might feel convenient today, be comfortable today if I spoke in Hindi. Some might be more comfortable if I spoke in Marathi, so on and so forth. Similarly, social and economic class, geographical region, knowledge systems, so on and so forth. Traditionally, some groups are better represented than others. And when I say that we need to have diversity, equity, and inclusion, it means we have to include those groups which have been so far excluded, maybe sometimes for historical reasons, such as traditional knowledge systems, or equity for those underrepresented groups, but some inclusion already exists, like gender. So, in case of gender, we would want to achieve equity. In case of traditional knowledge systems, we believe that we need to focus on including them in the general path towards application of technology and science to societal development. So, one of the motivations, which I already said about of diversity, equity, and inclusion, is to correct the historical injustices and the resulting exclusion of the different groups from processes of science. But let me also emphasize that it is equally important to realize that inclusion and diversity can only aid in increasing the efficacy of the scientific processes by increasing the dimensionality of the scientific ecosystem, which can only lead to further excellence. What does it mean? It means that diversity and inclusion increases the directions in which the scientific investigations can develop. At this point, I want to actually quote and remember Dharmapal, whose birth centenary we are celebrating this year. Many of my young colleagues may not even know his name. He was a great, I would say, for me, a great philosopher. And he said, it is not the Shastras and the Pandits that preserved our cultures and traditions, but the women and the Shudras. So, when we talk, for example, of accessing the traditional knowledge systems, which are essential, which is very essential to access the knowledge base of all sectors of society. So, the point that I'm trying to make is that diversity, equity, and inclusion is not just for the people who are excluded, but it is also because it is good for the development of science, technology, and innovation ecosystem. And why? I already referred to this, but now I will say a little bit more. Who we are affects what we do in science. Science is objective and universal. Newton's law will be Newton's law, even if it was discovered by Rohini Godbole. But issues in science that one chooses to investigate, processes that are put in place for scientific investigations, can all be influenced by our cultural and gender backgrounds. It takes a Shalini Arya of ICT to do research on newer methods of preservation of traditional foods such as chapati. And that had clearly to do something with her own childhood experiences. So I want to discuss importance of inclusion in the context of gender and knowledge systems. I will not, as I told you, diversity and inclusion means knowledge system, gender, language, geographical regions, age even. But I'm going to focus on gender and knowledge systems. And in the context of the three parts of the CSIR mission, which I already told you, which were written in red on one of my slides: science and technology leadership, science based entrepreneurship, and socio-economic development through STI interventions. And to this end, I think, I want to kind of talk about the desirability. I have so far only done that. Now I want to tell you what is it that we are concretely as a country doing, and then I will come to what I think CSIR has been doing and what they can do further. So STIP 2020, which was a science, technology, and innovation policy, which will be, which is still a draft policy, but I believe it will be adopted very soon. This was released in January 2021, and this has a very important, it is different from our earlier science and technology policies in a very important way, because it has a separate discussion of equity and inclusion. That is the point that I'm trying to belabor here in this short talk. And what it means is that the discussion of equity and inclusion cuts across all different issues that affect science and technology development. Previously, we had one discussion of gender equity, another one including those on the margins of society, etc., etc., etc. Now we believe that a holistic approach is what will take us towards faster towards our aim. And this policy actually provides renewed impetus to the mainstreaming of equity and inclusion within the STI ecosystem. I'm literally copying the lines which are there in the executive summary. An India centric equity and inclusion charter is supposed to be developed for tackling all forms of discrimination, exclusions, and inequalities in STI. And there, the focus has been given for development of an institutional mechanism. So I'm now requesting the CSIR institutions to lead the way. They have already begun the way, leading the way. The fact is that in 80 years, CSIR has got a first woman DG for the first time. So I want to request CSIR and its institutions to think about specific measures that one can institute at the institutional levels before they are not because they are mandated by the government, by analyzing the situation of each institution, which is very different, in terms of how we can make the atmosphere more inclusive. Now I come to the traditional knowledge system and innovation. An example of traditional knowledge system and innovation is actually the application of Ayurveda during the times of coronavirus. But of course, before we adopt the traditional knowledge systems, it's and before we innovate them, we have to first validate the traditional knowledge systems. Now, CSIR, in fact, has contributed enormously to some of these processes, thanks to its leaders like Mashayakar and Samir Brahmachari, and so on. Here, specifically, I speak of two initiatives of CSIR. One is the Traditional Knowledge Digital Library, which is, of course, to preserve the traditional knowledge. And the second is Open Source Drug Discovery, which is about diversity and open access to knowledge and information, which is normally hidden under patents and legal hurdles. Now, I want to make an appeal to you that quite often the keepers of the traditional knowledge, especially in the context of medicine, agriculture, are actually grassroots innovators. And who are these grassroots innovators? They are women as well as people who are outside the mainstream of the knowledge systems that you and I participate in. Recall here the words of Dharampal that it is not the Shastras and the Pandits that preserve the Indian tradition. It is he went to say that it was women and the Shudras, but it is the practitioners who have kept the practices alive. So it is important, of course, to validate traditional knowledge systems and then innovate. And I am hoping that CSIR can even more put in processes where that they can help and put in processes to help these grassroots innovators do the validation to begin with. And that is something, one of the recommendations that we have actually given to in STEEP 2020, not that CSIR do it. We have simply said that all the governmental agencies should try to think in terms of helping the grassroots innovations. And given the special emphasis that CSIR has on industrial applications, I think this becomes appeal to CSIR becomes even stronger. And because the idea is that these grassroots innovators have to convert the innovations into patents, products, and it has to lead to economic development. Actually, one of the things that was discussed when we drafted the chapter on equity and inclusion in STI in the context of grassroots innovators was that we need to increase the access of the grassroots innovators to processes for this validation and converting innovations into products. Now, I feel that CSIR, with its large number of field stations that are flung, to corners of India, would be an excellent position to help add, give extra help to these grassroots innovators. For example, first to validate, and secondly, to, for example, develop a product, get a patent, and so on and so forth. Now I will go to gender. I said I want to talk about knowledge systems, but now I want to put a little bit focus on gender. There are multiple contexts in which consideration of gender aspect are actually quite important in the context of the two aims of CSIR, that are three aims that I have put forward. I already said this, that women are keepers of traditional knowledge, may it be medicinal practices, maybe agricultural methodology, or maybe traditional food. And as I already said, that many of these can in turn lead to important innovations. In fact, the references of Anil Gupta's book, Grassroots Innovation. So this part I already dealt with, I discussed it. But I want to point one more point about why entrepreneurship has a particular gender aspect in my own mind. To begin with, I want to actually pay my respects to the grandmother of those all women entrepreneurs. And there is a wonderful book by Ganga Ben Yadnik, which she published in 1898, called, oh God, I should have put the name here. I have forgotten the name. I promised to give you the slides with the name of the book on the slide. But it had compilation of about 2080 trades, skills, and household tips for self-employment. And that is what entrepreneurship is all about. And training in science adds actually to the ways and means to this 2080 ways. Additionally, ways and means in which women can be entrepreneurs, can become financially independent, and add to the development of society and increase the impact of science. Why do I say that? Let me explain this in a few minutes. Actually, in India, compared to the rest of the world, the participation of women in studying science, for that matter, teaching science, you will find many of you, we have had excellent science teachers, women science teachers at all levels, whether it is in school, college, university. None of the places, the fraction of women studying science or teaching science is small. But where is it small? It is small when we start thinking about number of women doing science. That is certainly not commensurate with the number that studies science. Number of women in science in India is not small, but surely the number of women in Indian science is small. And we are all of us always agonizing and trying to figure out how to prevent this loss of Indian science. And we think that this will come only through empowerment of women. Of course, that's one way, but there are other ways. And I want to talk about that. Now, before this general statement that I gave you, let me also present a plot for you. It's a representative plot, and I have some real numbers. If anybody is interested, I can read them to documents. So, this is what I meant, that we have, large number of women undergraduate students in science, large number of women under master's students in science. Actually, the number of women in percentage of women getting PhD in science is about 35% today. But when you go to postdocs and young faculty, this immediately drops to 15%. And then when you go to professors and senior faculty, it goes down further to 10%. And when you start talking about science leaders, high achievers, it goes down to 4%, 3%. Talk of Infosys awards, talk of the Bhatnagar awards, talk of the academic fellowships, and then the talk of heads of the institutions, and the numbers are minuscule. How do we compare with the rest of the world? The world average for women in research is about 30%. And this diagram shows you that different colors correspond to different percentages. And here you see India is 0 to 30%, this pale lavender color, and the number is actually 15%, which means that we are in the middle of this lowest subgroup. And even, all the other countries close to us actually have much bigger fractions, and this is a cause for concern, but that we need to worry about. So the Indian problem is not the development of human resource, but also of human resource deployment. And this is where, we have to think of plugging this loss. And a country which is committed on path of innovation, we cannot afford this kind of brain drain. This loss of scientific human resource has to be stopped. Apart from losing the advantages of the diverse workforce brings, this is pragmatically also a problem of low return on what we are investing. So this is the problem, and actually this is understood, and there are a large number of obvious cures to solve this obvious problem that have been suggested, and actually many of these are directed towards getting women in faculty positions, in R&D jobs, and actually CSIR has been also very active in this context, and I'm very, very pleased to hear about the emphasis on empowerment of women, and that would come through policies that exist to come back to a career after a break in a career, policies for flexi times, encouraging young girls to choose science and technology, holding special training programs for women scientists. This is all very good, and this is all will happen. It is necessary, but not sufficient. The numbers are very big, and the drop is too steep. Now, here I want to make the last point that the entrepreneurship can be one more way to plug this loss. How can it be? It provides one extra pathway to avoid the brain drain. This is one road when flexi times are automatically possible. A break in the career is not as detrimental to future development as in basic science research, where the clock of science is ticking continuously when the body clock is also ticking. There exist many possibilities of the use of special skills that one acquires in during a PhD. It can be the expertise in the core subject, or it can be the tools and techniques that are required in the niche area, or simply a certain understanding of research methodology. The possibilities are endless, beginning from scientific communication, offering copy editing services to students, scientists, and journals, to using the core knowledge towards developing, for example, something like a drug delivery system. One of my colleagues, who is not an engineer, who is a biologist, in consultation with engineers, developed actually a very interesting drug delivery system. Everything goes. And there are many examples. And a lot of them right now are in the area of biotechnology. BIRAC actually plays a very special role. And I feel that CSIR could actually set up a special program directed at women for entrepreneurship using their science training. Again, I want to tell you here who we are affects what we do. For example, this is young Aditi Gupta. She created what is called Ministropedia. And this is actually just now, she has received 50 lakh at 20% equity from CEO of MQ Pharmaceuticals for the small startup. And you can see how young she is. Age is also no bar. So there are, many pathways in which women entrepreneurs can actually contribute. There is this wonderful book by Autumn Stanley called Mothers and Daughters of Invention. So there are 5, 6 areas. One is agriculture and related technology. I already mentioned it. Medicine and health. I already mentioned it. Kiran Majumdar Shah is a shining example of an entrepreneur. Fertility and anti-fertility. Our own Indira Hinduja, who started a big program with this. Tools and machines. I could not find really right now an Indian example, but I can give an example of a Dutch uh, engineer called Caroline Bleeker, who was actually responsible for discovery of phase contrast microscope, which actually got a Nobel Prize, but she was not the Nobel Prize winner. Then computers and related technology. There is Suchi Mukherjee, who has an entrepreneur in that subject. So, according to Forbes India, over 20% of MSME are owned by women entrepreneurs, which amounts to about 23.3% of the labor force. So, that's a great thing. The number is rising at much faster pace, with 50% of the India startup ecosystem is empowered by women in some or the other way. All the major research and teaching institutes are interested in incubation centers, and possibilities are endless. I'm really thinking that CSIR could step in here and think about supporting grassroots women entrepreneurs who may not be able to easily reach the incubation centers of the major research and teaching institutions. So this is the case of Muhammad going if Muhammad going to the mountain, rather mountain going to Muhammad, if it's not the other way around. So the journey on the path towards an Atmanirbhar prospering India requires all hands on deck, no matter what gender, no matter what knowledge system, no matter what race, no matter what language. CSIR already has many processes in place to harness all the sources to achieve this mission, being even more inclusive with respect to the knowledge systems, gender, and social groups in these processes will make the journey even more successful. All my best to CSIR towards its vision of new CSIR for New India in the coming years. Thank you very much, and thanks for your patience.